In fact, while we're keeping an eye on that, we're also getting your pictures direct from Wuhan in China, in central China, where President Xi Jinping will be hosting a summit with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So you're seeing those two pictures on your left. They're happening at the same time in Wuhan and in the demilitarized zone in South Korea and North Korea border. You see the first meeting between the two leaders. Some words being exchanged. Translator was also audible in that the first of what we believe is 6 meetings that the Prime Minister will hold with President Xi Jinping over the next 24 hours or so. This is a special exhibition tour that he's taking at the Hubei Provincial Museum, where the culture and history of the province and the city is in fact being displayed.
The central Chinese city of Wuhan giving out a grand welcome to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who is, as we speak, with President Xi Jinping. This is moments after the two leaders firmly shook hands. A historic summit, a first of its kind meeting taking place informally between two leaders. That is expected to take place over the next 2 days. The two leaders will be spending a considerable amount of time with each other. On the cards is also a boat ride that the two leaders will be on, during which a lot of those discussions will take place. A lot, of course, on the table, but as we've been pointing out, this is an informal meeting between the two leaders of the two Asian giants. The stress on informality cannot be laid enough. That is the underlying tone for which this meeting has geared up. Anticipation in the air as the central Chinese city of Wuhan opens its arms to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. A red carpet welcome there for the Indian leader. The two leaders shook hands, after which special performance for the two leaders. Of course, Wuhan is a city which speaks a lot when it comes to historical and cultural ties as well, that have been laid emphasis on. The two leaders will be spending considerable amount of time over the next 2 days as a part of this informal meeting. What's important to note here also is that when the two leaders do undertake those talks, there is no set agenda, there is no structured schedule for those talks. And from that red carpet to welcome, and now Chinese President Xi Jinping and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi sitting down for those talks. This, of course, is just the beginning of the 2-day-long informal summit that the two leaders will be engaging in. A host of issues that will be discussed, but as we've been pointing out, this is an informal meeting between the two leaders of the two Asian giants. That's the underlying tone, which is why when the two leaders also undertake a boat ride and a stroll in the park later as a part of those engagements, they will be joined by interpreters, but no note takers, no media personnel right around them, no joint statement, no structured agenda for this meeting, which was what makes this a one of its kind, historic and significant meeting between the two leaders. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping moments ago shook hands when the Chinese leader welcomed the Indian leader in the central Chinese city of Wuhan. This is on the banks of the Hubei province. Of course, a lot of significance also attached with the choice of the venue here. Wuhan lays a lot of emphasis when it comes to historical and cultural ties as well between the two countries. It's an unofficial venue when it comes to the two leaders hosting those talks. On the right of your screens is that performance that the two leaders were greeted with when they shook hands just a few moments ago. On the left of your screens are the live visuals coming in as the two leaders engage in those talks. Important to highlight here, the two leaders will be spending a good amount of time over the next 2 days as the two leaders will be discussing a range of issues. But what's also very interesting to note here is that a lot of speculation over what will be discussed. What's also important here is the timing under which this meeting is taking place. Let's also speak a little bit about the larger picture, the context under which this meeting is taking place. A lot has been made of what really drew China to the discussions table as well, given the trade war that China and US are currently interlocked in. This is also coming on a day when the crucial historic Inter-Korean Summit is taking place. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi with Chinese President Xi Jinping undertaking those talks. This is just the first of the several engagements that they will be undertaking over the next 2 days in the central Chinese city of Wuhan. Let's go straight across now to WION's associate editor Palki Sharma Upadhyay, who is in Wuhan tracking the latest for us. Informality is the buzzword, Palki, when it comes to this meeting. There we have it, that handshake exchange between the two leaders. And this is the first of the several engagements that the two leaders will be engaged in.
Yes, informality is the word. That's the term that both sides have been stressing upon. You know what happens when you keep it informal, when you do not give out much information, when you say there is no agenda, nothing's going to come out of it. The positive is that you're not weighed down by the burden of expectation because you did not set any. The negative is that there is immense speculation and people make of it what they think best. So one newspaper headline or editorial described it as a couple therapy. Modi and Xi meeting along the banks of the Yangtze River, going for a boat ride on a lake and then taking a walk in the park, sort of mending a relationship that saw some ups and downs. Let me get the details out of the way first of all. They're meeting right now at the Hubei Provincial Museum. It is for an exhibition of Marquis Yi of Zheng cultural relics and treasure. Remember, Wuhan has a very rich cultural history and is very, very significant in both contemporary China and the past. And so this is going to be an opportunity for the Indian Prime Minister to be acquainted with what this town is all about, the so-called Tier 1.5 city, not exactly Tier 2, on its way to becoming Tier 1, and almost there if you look at it from Indian eyes, the kind of infrastructure and the kind of development that we've seen. Wuhan alone accounts for $230 million of Chinese exports to India, and these are figures from a few years back, so it has grown since then. It is a bustling town, a cosmopolitan metropolis is how it was described in the past. So it's an interesting setting for this meeting, and we've said enough, and a lot of ink has been shed on the agenda and the expectations and the possible outcome when nobody knows for sure what is going on except for the two leaders, perhaps, Molly. So we can only look at the color and the mood and the symbolism and what people here are saying. I can tell you that India is very, very popular, and someone I met earlier said that the only Prime Minister that we can pronounce, whose name we can pronounce properly from India, is Prime Minister Modi. It sort of sounds Chinese to them. So that's the kind of mood here on the ground, and people are very excited to see what comes out of this meeting.
Absolutely, anticipation and excitement in the air. Palki, and re-engagement or a reset, these are different terms that have been used to describe this meeting. But what does remain clear, as you also pointed out, is that only the two leaders know what is going to be discussed and what the takeaways really will be. There will be no joint declaration. There will be no inking of any agreement. Only the interpreters will be with them. Is that right?
Yes, as I've said earlier, Molly, agreements, joint statements, a memorandum of understanding, these give a certain formal tone to an engagement. And so we'll have some clarity on what was discussed, possibly in an off-the-record briefing that will come later, some sort of information that might come out. But you know how this government believes in operating. It believes in operating and doing its homework and doing its work silently and quietly, and then coming out and telling the world, look, this is what we've achieved, and this is where we are going. Instead of getting everyone on board and ruining the equation there. So they're being very, very careful as to what comes out, not sharing very much. Even the Indian side and the Chinese have always been like that. So we do not know for sure. But if you have to ask me or ask anyone who's been following this broadly, border, of course, will be on top of the agenda. They want border resolution, enough of management. They're looking at resolution now, once and for all. Let's settle this problem. Second, they're looking at BRI, which is very, very important to China, and India is looking at investments, trade. China is looking at fighting protectionism, fighting the American policy. So that's one solid point of convergence for the two leaders. They're also looking at India's UNSC membership that China has been stalling, maybe some concessions coming there. But that again is something that's in the air. No one said it for sure, and we do not know what sort of a deal they strike. They're saying that they're not looking at nitty-gritties. They're looking at a larger framework. They're looking at sending out a larger message. We have decided to resolve X, Y, Z things, and now whatever falls under it, whether it be NSG membership, whether it be Masood Azhar, and all the other pinpricks, the CPEC going through Gilgit-Baltistan, there are a lot of bugbears, and those things will be settled by and by. But for the moment, they're looking at broader strokes and sending out the larger message.